there's another one that I think is similar but different to this, which is people who are more analytical versus people who are more action-oriented.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm actually, while I'm introverted, I am action-oriented.
Right.
And so I'm more prone to be like, in the meeting, all right, so what's the decision? 30 seconds to make the decision. Here we go, off to the races. Let's see what happens. Whereas other folks might say, wow, she just steamrolled right now and did not give us a chance to really get the data and analyze and see different perspectives. Sure. And like, I think we should wait another month to figure out, like, you know, grow the metrics and see more what might be the domino effect of this decision, right? And I think that one often can turn into, oh, she steamrolled, or like, oh my gosh, that person is disengaged, or they're just you can look at someone who's analytical and think, that person is a challenger, that person is never satisfied, that person is always poking holes and finding the problems. Right. And yes, they are doing that, but that's actually helpful, because if you make my 30-second decision, and that's how we run a business, or go start a new project, or whatever it is, that can miss a lot of really important edge cases or holes in the plan, plot holes, if you will, right. and cause more work and more inefficiency later. Sure. And so I've seen that be actually one of the biggest tension points when it comes to teams working together.
You can have multiple people that are on this spectrum of what I would call maybe risk orientation, and for those that are very high in this analytical tendency, they want all the information before they make a decision. They want complete information, right? Like no holes in it. It's perfect. We know exactly where it came from. We know exactly what it means, which we all know is impossible, right? Like you never know everything about all the information you're being given. And they want to be the ones themselves that cultivated it or understand it, because sometimes people bring information to you, and sometimes we don't necessarily trust it because we weren't the ones that found it and really understand its origins and sources. So all of that together is related to how we engage with the information and how comfortable we are with it. So those that are heavy on analytical are somewhat low in risk orientation. And then those that are more willing to have this higher risk propensity would say, hey, this is as good as we're going to get, and we have to make forward progress here. We got to get something done, right? That meeting, your inbox, as we looked at right before this podcast, is overflowing with messages that may never actually get addressed.
Sorry for anyone who emails me.
Right. And I'm over here with inbox 0, and I just have a very different work stream, right? Like you're being bombarded by people and I'm not. And so I think that a lot of times some of those conflicts happen because you have a very different strategic goal within your day-to-day tasks than some other people might, right?
Absolutely.
You've got to push through and make it happen and make forward progress because of the situation. And it creates these conflicts. And so is it good or bad to be low or high on analytical / risk orientation? Just depends.
Again, it's a continuum.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum, and you can fall on different sides and you can flex, but we all have our tendency of where our gut takes us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun academic study that hits this topic. So most people in the research would assume that the more risk-oriented you are, the more innovative you'll be. Because you're willing to take information and come up with new, big, interesting ideas, and you go for it. And what we found in the research was that, yes, there is a correlation, there's a relationship between being risk-oriented and being innovative, but it's actually relatively small. And what we found was that when you had a leader and a employee that are working together, the employee is more likely to be innovative in their day-to-day decisions and tasks and ideas that they come up with if that leader and the employee are different on risk orientation.
Oh, so it doesn't matter which one is which, it just matters that they're different.
That's right.
Wow, that's interesting.
And the theory behind it is that if you really want to be innovative, the precursor to that is what's called intellectual stimulation. Right? You're thinking about things differently than what you have before. So if you're the leader that is high on risk orientation, you are more than happy to push forward and charge through regardless of having everything that you need, you're forcing me to think differently if I'm low on risk orientation. I'm thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and I'm thinking about the problems, but you're forcing me to kind of think about it from a different angle. And together, it allows us to engage in for me to have more intellectual stimulation, which then allows me to be more innovative.
Right.
And then the opposite can happen as well. Right, so I'm in the opposite seat so it doesn't matter which side it is, as long as those differences actually help each other.
That makes me think of, we talk a lot about cognitive diversity, another academic sounding term, but it just means people who think differently working
thought
together,
diversity.
Having thought diversity. That sounds more approachable than cognitive. But yeah, like I've actually, that's interesting that a study that shows that specifically for risk orientation, but it's definitely what we observe across all the spectrums of introversion, extroversion, or analytical, action-driven, all of the differences. It's really about, do you have diversity here in how people look at situations, and do you have the psychological safety or the like emotional space where people can express those differences and it's safe. They're not seen as like, gosh, it's
a big part of it.
Low risk person who's asking all the questions, like, man, they just can't loosen up and get with it, and you start judging their character, right?
It's not an annoyance. It's recognized as a potential benefit. And actually, so this is a study I published in Personnel Psychology, and there was a similar variable. The extent to which those differences led to the beneficial impact of innovation was dependent upon the extent to which the leader was higher in what's called authority openness. Essentially, a willingness to listen and to respect the opinions of their employee. Right? So it only worked if the leader was actually saying, I appreciate this difference, as opposed to having this mentality of, I want you to think just like me, which a lot of times is what I think leaders do.
Gosh, I feel like that should be the opening of the podcast. It's like, hey, basically, when you're open to different perspectives, you do really cool things.
Yeah, it really
So have openness, and here's some differences to consider.
Yeah, absolutely.